I'm Yousef Cisco. I'm the front-end development lead at Harvey Nichols, and I've been working in eCom for most of my career. I've seen projects from inception, I've seen replatforms, migrations, and complete overhauls. And I'm here to talk to you about migrating your front-end stack, which is usually a very difficult task, and it will take probably a couple of years, but it's not impossible. So what's the problem that you might be facing? You're probably dealing with like old technology that your dev team hates. If you're especially in e-commerce, I think everybody struggles with this. And migrating is just generally hard. When you're trying to do this, you usually will uncover features that the business forgot about 4 years ago, or the bug that's been saving your ass for the last 3 years. And you might be dealing with like a big monolith application, or you're stuck in microservice hell where you're trying to debug that one service that this one guy wrote 3 years ago and left. So, and then even saying the word replatform to your boss just like sends silence in the room and everybody panics. So if you're dealing with this kind of situation, it's very difficult for you to move forward with the technology and keep up to speed with industry, I guess. So the migration, obviously you can do it in one big move if somebody will sign off on like, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of pounds of a project. Or you can take the phased approach, which I call the Apple way. They famously migrated their website over to like a responsive web design. When they were doing it and during that transition, they had like responsive header, but then completely fixed width pages for all their old products. And as they rolled out brand new products, it was like super amazing, really nice pages. And they slowly migrated their entire site. The benefits to this is that this phased approach allows you to start delivering value back to the business much, much quicker. So then your boss will be happy, the directors will be happy, everybody is like, oh wow, this is doing so great. Let's continue with this program of work. That's gonna take another 2 years or whatever. So you work on like basically 3 month project intervals. So you work on, for example, like one set of features or one page or something, you deliver that back to the business in 3 months, you're able to A/B test the outcome, deliver those results, talk about amazing metrics to your board, and when you're firefighting after you've delivered that feature, it's only like 2 weeks since one feature instead of a whole goddamn website, and then you move forward, you move on to the next thing. It's really great. This also removes the pressure on you and your team to get everything right. And if you've ever been involved with a replatform, it is a lot of pressure. It is daunting that you think about the account page. Or actually, one time I had an issue where the password confirmation didn't match the password because the server was trying to protect against cross-site scripting. Which meant that when you put any special characters in your password, it wasn't actually your password and you could never log in ever again. So like issues like that crop up like 2 months later when your boss tries to put an ampersand in their password and you're like, shit. So also doing it in a phased approach allows you to really consider the architecture of your application and change as the time goes on. I remember that when we started doing this at Harvey Nichols, we chose atomic design, which sounded really great. It was amazing. And then 3 weeks down the line, we canned it just because it was giving us, it was like too rigid and too structured for what we were using it. And actually, it wasn't 3 weeks, it was on the second project. But it wasn't working for us as a team and we didn't like it. The end result that you're probably trying to look for is like a super slick, super fast front end. You probably want a single page application, which improves the perceived performance of the site. When you're talking to the board or the directors, they honestly don't care about any of your metrics about performance or speed. They just care about how fast the page loads on their iPad. So you're like, okay, sure. So single page application really improves the perceived performance of your site. And this also allows you to take it to the next level and create a progressive web app, which if you're in e-commerce, you'll understand the importance of having an app so that your customers can shop in whatever way that they're comfortable with or whatever way they want. And if you're going to do this, then if you are going to create an app, then you don't want to have to maintain 2 other code bases, especially not if you're leading a front-end team, because you probably don't have that skill set. So progressive web app solves that problem by allowing you to turn your website into an app, giving you like app-like features like notifications. What is the other thing? The thing with the background, can't remember it. Okay, and they're finally gaining traction now that Apple has given it their blessing and they're rolling it out, except they didn't give us notifications. It's super annoying. And you're a front-ender, so you definitely know about choice fatigue. So When you start this project, you obviously have to decide on the technologies that you want to use, and this decision is usually quite daunting because you're tying your company up for the foreseeable with those technologies and those things. You're definitely already suffering from choice fatigue. Vue, React, Angular, whatever new thing the kids are talking about, it's always a little bit painful to like look through all of that and figure out what you can actually use for the next year or two and commit to as a team. I remember in the initial phase of this, I chose an XML parser, and it was just like the first one that I saw. I think it was being used by another library. I was like, yeah, that's totally reliable, great, used it. Put it on. When we first went live with this page, and this was like the first one, the performance was abysmal, like absolutely horrendous. So I was just like digging into it, and I find out this XML parser is the worst one out there, literally. So I spent like a couple of days ripping it out, changing it for another one, and I get back 93 milliseconds just for a couple of days worth of work. So it was really amazing. And our entire, just for context, the entire response time was like 200 and something milliseconds. So 93 was quite significant. And I mean, even if you do make the decision that's not right, which we have done time and time again, the importance is that you need to constantly iterate, and you should you should always refactor. So if you find something that's not working for you or the team, then just move on, change it, refactor, and always pay back your technical debt. So if you're not able to like completely re-architect your whole site, then do whatever you can at the time, and then come back to it, move things back so everything is consistent. Another thing that's a bit of an issue with front-end tech especially is that all of the libraries that are out there kind of expect you to be living in this like ideal scenario world where everything is super perfect and you're not migrating anything from an old stack, so you can create great URLs that are really amazing, that like flow and are completely hierarchical and make sense to everybody except you and your business. So this makes it very difficult. So there were so many times that we were constantly digging into all of like the edge, not the edge cases, but like all the really weird scenarios with libraries that we're using. And I'll go into those a little bit more. And then trying to look at examples that were completely like half-assed, and then eventually digging into source code to figure out how something works and how I can make it work for our use case. And yeah, it's a little bit of pain. But if you're doing this, Varnish is going to be your new best friend. For those of you who don't know, Varnish is a HTTP accelerator. It's a cache/reverse proxy. The beauty of Varnish is that you get to program it. So with Varnish configuration language, you literally get to write code at the edge. This is a super powerful tool because you can write code before the request even hits your backend. So when you're doing a big migration like this, it allows you to first of all route requests dynamically across all of your different backends and obscure that messiness from your users. It also supports edge-side includes, which for those of you unfamiliar with them, it allows you to embed a fragment in a page. So with a HTML tag that looks like this, it's just ESI:include, and then you specify the SRC as if it's an image. Varnish, once it gets that from one of your backends, it will try to fetch, for example, in this case, one.html from wherever else. So what this means is that you can include the header of your site and have it rendered from one backend, your old one probably, and then have the full page, the actual page, rendered by your new backend. With all of your cool new technologies, React, Redux, the lot. You also get to do like regular expressions at the edge, and yeah, like I said, routing across multiple backends. And then because you're able to do this really cool routing stuff, you can also start running more complicated things like A/B tests across multiple backends. So an actual full-on 50-50 split. And this is super easy to configure in Varnish, because in the same way that you're saying, okay, men's all clothing should go to backend A, because that's where our website lives. When you roll out backend B, you can say men's all clothing usually routes to backend A, but if you have the B version of the test cookie, then goes to B. And then that way you have a 50-50 split. And you're actually comparing completely randomly, like side by side, all the people visiting the different pages, and your metrics are beautiful, of course, because you're rolling it out. It's all new and it's amazing. The cool thing about regular expressions is it also allows, at the edge, is it allows you to do things like rewrites super easily, rewrites and redirects super easily. So we had to do this. We had to remove the segment category out of the URL because the SEO team like 4 years ago thought it was a great idea to put category in, but if you actually remove men's all clothing, it 404s, but whatever. So we're like, okay, well, we don't need that 404, we need to remove this now. And doing that at the edge helped a lot because it meant that we weren't having to manage it in Apache on Magento, and we weren't having to do it in Express.js again on the new stuff, and we didn't have to really worry about it while we were in transition. Everything was just done in one place, and it was a lot easier. So obviously your site will have common elements like the header, footer, and some global scripts, and I think global scripts is like the most painful of them. And you're always aiming to, you don't really want to copy your header and footer across different backends, so you can supply it. So this is where ESI has really come into handy. Okay. Yeah, so you put the navigation into Fragments and then you embed it on the different pages, and it's a lot easier that way. This also allows you to take advantage, and then the hardest part here is actually encapsulating all of your scripts so they're just completely independent and they're not conflicting with anything else. So your navigation scripts need to just depend on themselves and not really have to interact with anything else on the page, and nothing else on the page should like touch them. That was the hardest part for us, I think. But it also allows you, while you're in this phase, to take advantage of some of the old stuff. For example, the new ways to use fetch for AJAX requests, which makes a lot of sense because it's implemented in a lot of new browsers. But then for older browsers, we had to put a fetch polyfill in. And actually, it was a lot easier to just rely on jQuery while the old browsers started dying out and we started dropping support for them. So, because jQuery was already loaded on the page. So we're reducing the page weight by doing this. One of the other problems that we kind of ran into, which proved to be, in the end, it was really helpful, was server-side rendering. So you have to get server-side rendering done, otherwise your SEO team will have a complete fit. And your users will also like the improved perceived performance as they see an actual page being rendered in front of them before they're able to start interacting with it. So we chose Express.js as our backend because it was backed by IBM. It's pretty solid, it's been out there for years, and everybody seems to be using it, which is great. The issue is that Express.js and React, which is the other technology we chose, don't always play very well together. So for example, a few years ago, so first of all, you need to use a different, because JSX doesn't support doc type and body and head and all of those different elements, then you have to use a secondary templating language. So we used Pug, because that's bundled with Express.js. It's really great. And you'll need to do some more complicated things, so you'll definitely need to use Pug. But that means you're already using two different templating languages. And then a few years ago, React produced this really cool thing where you can start streaming the response as it's being rendered from the server to the client. So really great, except we couldn't take advantage of it because we needed the full streamed response out to embed inside the Pug template before we could actually respond back to the client. So there's some things that make it a little bit annoying. But then, and another thing is that React doesn't support, JSX doesn't really support ESI tags because it expects to be able to for the client to render the same exact thing as a server, which obviously if you're modifying the response that's coming back from the server, then it's not going to match. So we had to put all ESI tags in Pug outside of React, which was, you get used to it. Routing, this is the thing I was going to talk about earlier. So while you're in the transitional phase, Varnish really helps with this because you're able to kind of like go across different backends without really exposing all of that mess to your users. And SEO is always a big concern when you're doing this because they're going to hate you if you're changing the URLs 3 times a year trying to do this. So you really have to keep things the same. And then, but also because of this, it means that you don't get to use all the latest new technologies like React Router, which is super amazing. Except they recently, I don't know, how many of you guys have used React Router before? Okay. Have you seen the new dynamic routing thing that they just released? Raise your hands, maybe? No? Okay. In React Router 4, they have this, yeah, okay. There's like dynamic routing where every component gets to define what route it should be rendered on. So say you have like a little pop thing at the side that says your account name, so then that only gets rendered on the account pages and it specifies that itself, which is super great. except it means that that doesn't really fit into the whole idea of being able to say, okay, on Menzel clothing, you should show these exact components or this page, which is like the normal way of doing it. Here, it's like, okay, well, each component will decide what it wants as it's flowing through. It's not great. So we couldn't take advantage of these new this kind of stuff because it just doesn't fit in while you're trying to migrate. So we have like very separate pages running all kind of independently, using a lot of like shared components, which is really great. But then when you want to implement something like this, it just doesn't really fit in. So yeah, so what we had to do was basically have the URL. Basically, we had to manipulate the URL ourselves completely independently of React Router. And we made it depend on the data, which I think was probably one of the most helpful things ever. So if you're doing this, it'll probably help. So instead of having a user action, like somebody clicking on a button, update the URL, and then that starts fetching the data, we had it so that the user action fetches the data, and then based on that data, we update the URL. So then the URL is just a side effect to like kind of keep the user in check. It works really well. Once you've finished all of these things, you want to bring it all together. So you're going to be moving out of like separate independent pages, which is where we're at right now, with lots of ESI tags everywhere because it really helps you while you're migrating, into one single page application. So that, because you have a whole journey throughout and you want to move it, you really want to bring the single page application, probably roll out PWA afterwards. At this point, I think this is what we're going through right now, is you'll have to remove any hacks that you depended on to kind of just like get things up and running. And then you're gonna have to remove any of all the old functionality. For example, on the site, we found it was gonna take us too long to build the Ajax basket, like, you know, the mini cart again. So we just like kept the old JavaScript and we're like, okay, cool, we'll just put the same elements in the same place. The old JavaScript still works, great. Except now that we're moving over to single page application, we're like, well, we can't use the old JavaScript anymore. So we're having to rebuild that. But this is where getting your business to sign off a project like PWA really helps, because that's a whole project where the whole point is to improve the performance of the site. The whole point is to improve the customer experience. And a lot of that depends on like you and your team using better technologies, really doing everything that you've dreamt of, all in one big project that the business is like backing. So that's where we're at now. We're currently A/B testing our checkout with a proper 50-50 split, and working on PWA. So the next thing is going to be actually making a single page application across from the homepage all the way to the checkout.